Hello and welcome to the Style Spot channel. If it's your first time with us, we're glad that you're here. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our weekly videos. And if you're returning, we're glad that you're back. In today's video, I'm going to talk about 4 fashion shows: Gucci, Max Mara, Prada, and Christopher Kane. So I went into this cold meeting. I didn't read any critic reviews. I didn't look at how the collection was received. I didn't look at photography ahead of time. Didn't get on social media. I just watched the shows cold to get a really clean first impression, and then I took notes about the production and the collection, which is what we're going to talk about here. I'll also put the links in the description below so that you can watch these shows, and please leave a comment what you thought, what you liked, what you didn't like, things you'd be interested in wearing, or things that inspired you about the shows, or just your general thoughts on it. I'd love to hear from you, so let's get to it. Let's start with Gucci. This was my favorite from a production standpoint. It took a long time to actually get to the start of the show. Once the live stream started, it was 45 minutes of behind the scenes footage of models getting ready, and don't get me wrong, I love behind the scenes footage, but 45 minutes seemed a little bit long to me. So in the link in the description below for the show, I started you off at 45 minutes, which is right before the show starts. So if you want to back that footage up and watch the behind the scenes a little bit, you can do that. Otherwise, you'll start right when the show starts, which was very dramatic. The lights went down and then it came back up, and you were watching almost like a carousel. So instead of a traditional runway, just a straight, single kind of lane the models were walking down, when it opens, you'll see that the models are still in a preparation process, and there's a giant metronome kind of ticking in the background, and then as the models are ready, they kind of come forward, staggered one at a time, but they're on, the best way to describe it is like you're looking at a carousel. So they come forward, they're behind glass, and they're on a floor. The floor is turning, right, in a continuous circle, and they stand motionless. Once they get up to the front, like facing the audience, they just stand motionless, and that was very different from anything that I'd ever seen, because usually the models are creating the movement. They're showing how the fabric moves, how it's draped, how it flows, but they were completely motionless. And what created the movement was the floor moving underneath them. But aside from that, what I thought was really interesting about the collection itself was that there were a lot of historical references. So again, with the metronome in the back and then it looking like a carousel, to me it was almost like a clock. So I think time was definitely a central theme, and you could see there were some looks that were straight up 70s. There were looks that it almost looked like from the 1600s, referencing puritanical style. They had large hoop skirts, from around the Civil War. There were references to very preppy, almost like in the 90s when, like if you think about the movie Clueless, where they were wearing knee socks and pleated skirts like what you would wear in a private school. So there wasn't a clear period of time they were referencing. It was almost like an abbreviated history of fashion. So if you like fashion that's based on historical periods, I think you'll find the show really interesting. So leave a comment below. The Max Mara show I thought was the most easily accessible out of the 4. It was very well lit. The tent that the runway show was in had a clear roof, so it let in plenty of natural light, and on top of the light that was already in the room, so it allowed you to really see the details of the garments and the colors that were in the collection, which compared to the other 4 shows, the other shows were a lot darker, and so I really liked that about this show. You could actually see the details of the collection. I also like that the models were on the same level as the audience, and the proximity of the models was such that they were just out of reach. So the audience almost looked like they could reach out and touch the clothing. So again, if you were there, you could see the details and the construction of how things were made. So I really liked that from a production standpoint. The collection itself was exciting because for a fall winter collection, I like to see very warm, soft fabrics, and this collection had that. The piles of some of these fabrics were, so in other words, it was thick, you know, your pile height. And so it's not going to be the most flattering, because if you have a thick fabric, it's going to kind of look like it's adding volume to your body. But the flip side of that is that because it's not figure hugging, you're going to get grace for your waist. So if there's a little bit of extra holiday weight or anything like that, then this is going to be a great collection, because you're going to have moving room and breathing room in those coats and in the jackets that were in the collection. It looked like really soft fabrics. So yeah, I like the collection a lot as a whole, and I like the production value. So Max Mara collection was up there for me, definitely. All right, let's talk about Prada. Very well-known fashion house. I don't think there's many people in the world that haven't heard of Prada. I have a lot to say about this show, and I wish that I had more to say about the collection itself. Unfortunately, I couldn't really see very much of it because it was very theatrical. So instead of being a runway, it was set up where there were 2 rooms, and the audience was sitting down, looking almost like in an amphitheater or in a TV studio. They were looking down into these 2 rooms. And the lighting, there really was very little lighting around the rooms. And then in the rooms, there were 12 doorways or door frames per room. And then the models were coming out of random doorways, or to me it seemed random. I'm sure that they were very well timed and choreographed, but you didn't know when a model was going to pop out of which door, and then multiple models sometimes were crossing the room at the same time, so you didn't know which model to look at, or if they were, I'm sure they wouldn't have collided, but it's possible. So that was kind of distracting in that you're making sure that the models don't, you know, have a collision. They were also crossing from room to room. So sometimes you would see from one room into the other. So it was really, the garment or the model was really far away. So yeah, just the angles, and then having models come in from different doorways and random times. It was really distracting, I felt like. And so I wish my takeaway in my memory was more of the clothing being presented rather than the production of it. And it wasn't really lit very well, I didn't feel like. There was also lines on the floor and lines on the walls going in different directions. The music was really fast-paced, almost fast-paced, like the models were walking. And so between the pacing, I'm sure the collection is beautiful. I don't remember too much of it because the production kind of took away from it for me. But if you watch it and you are able to really focus, and let me know what you liked from the collection, because I'd be interested to hear. So let me know in the comments below. This last collection was Christopher Kane. It was a 360-degree fashion show. So if you haven't seen one of those before, it's where you as the viewer control what your viewpoint is. So it's not fixed like on a runway where you're stuck watching from one perspective. You can choose where you're looking. The runway, instead of being straight or just linear one runway, it was presented like a wheel, and each spoke on the wheel was a runway with a model walking in different directions, but it wasn't one model at a time. And then the camera, unfortunately, was fixed from the ceiling, so you had a bird's eye view looking down on this wheel. And again, you can move the camera, so if you click the link below, you can see what I'm talking about. But you can move the camera to look down these different spokes, but you don't know when the models are coming. So you can move the camera, but there's no model. So then you're kind of chasing where to look, you know, where's the next look coming from. And then the runway is long enough to where when the model is far away, it's hard to see the detail of the clothing. And then when they get closer, because the camera's on the ceiling, it's almost a bird's eye view. So you can't see a lot of detail. I wish I could say more about the collection. I really do. From what I could see, it was mostly triangles, very geometric in how the clothing was cut. So check it out. Look at the link. Let me know what you think about 360-degree runway shows. I'd be curious to hear what you think, so leave comments. Alright, this has been a review of 4 fashion shows. We'd like to do more. For sure, I would like to cover the Burberry collection because I thought that was a really strong show. If there's a designer that you love that you'd like us to take a look at their runway show, just leave a note in the comments below. We're so glad that you came to the Style Spot channel. We'll see you next time.